thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm Stephanie Houghton. I'm going to be playing host. I use she, her pronouns. I am the organizing and legislative director for Fair Vote Washington. None of you are here to see me, though. You're all here to see our special guest, Maya Wiley. And I will just toss it over to you. We're going to do a couple of interview questions and then kind of open it for Q&A. Oh, one thing I do have to say, if you would like to ask a question tonight, please use the Q&A feature, not the chat feature. And with that, I'm going to go on mute. And if you want to introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Well, good evening. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Fair Vote Washington. I am Maya Wiley. I'm a civil rights attorney. I've had a few jobs in my day, including founding a not-for-profit policy strategy organization called the Center for Social Inclusion, which focuses on racial justice policy. I also served as the first Black woman to be a counsel to New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio back in his first term. And I was a candidate in the Democratic primary for mayor in 2021.
Terrific. So I guess we'll just get right into it here. I come from a campaign background, but I have not worked on a ranked choice voting election. So I guess my first question for you is, how did you first hear about ranked choice voting, and what did you think about it when you first heard about it?
You know, I'm not sure I can say when I first heard about it. You know, as a civil rights attorney and as someone who worked at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and whom the late and great Lonnie Guinier was also an alum of. Lonnie Guinier had written articles on cumulative voting, and some of you all may remember that Bill Clinton had nominated her to be essentially the Department of Justice's civil rights chief. And she was roundly attacked for her legal writings about how cumulative voting would be a better and fairer system. And she was a voting rights attorney. And so, you know, ranked choice voting comes out of this tradition, right, of thinking about alternatives to how we currently do things that make it more inclusive, that make it less of a winner take all, and something that gives, you know, really voters the way to understand and be able to rank their votes in a way that more matches how people think about candidates, because voters have very complex views about people. And the idea that there's just one and there's none other, you know, that's been something that, you know, people like Lonnie Guinier had written about for a very long time. I co-chaired as one of the many, not the only, but one of the co-chairs of the campaign to bring ranked choice voting to New York City. And I did that before I knew I was going to run for mayor.
Okay.
That was not about running for mayor. It was really just about being someone who has a lot of respect for citizen action. Susan Lerner, who really was one of the leaders of that fight. But also because I then, before I decided to chair the campaign, when Susan asked me, I did my research, because I am a policy wonk, because I do think a lot about racial justice and what improves voting, particularly for people of color, for people who are disabled, for all kinds of folks who are normally kept out of the system. But I did my research and it confirmed what I believed, but I wanted to know, as a matter of fact, that it would be a democratic reform, a small d democratic reform that would be good for voters, good for democracy, good for participation. So I'm a believer, and I was before I ran for mayor.
Terrific. Yeah, that's something that we come up against a lot, is like, what problem are you trying to solve? So I really appreciate all the research that you did to sort of say, like, I know there's a problem. This will actually help us find that solution. How did running in a ranked choice voting election affect the way that you ran?
You know, I love this question for many reasons. It's a good question. And but the short answer is it didn't. Now, one of the reasons it didn't is because, you know, one of the benefits of ranked choice voting is that it should make candidates nicer to each other, right? Because, you know, in a ranked choice system, you know, part of the design is you might not be someone's first choice, but maybe you could convince them that you're their second choice or their third choice. And so it's a structure that actually kind of imposes a discipline on candidates, to be nice to each other. I was a neophyte as a politician. I'd never run for office before. My mama would not have been nice to me. She passed away, but she taught me better. I was one of the people who don't like when politicians tear each other up and do negative things. So I don't feel like ranked choice really changed how I ran that much, to be honest with you. If I had a disagreement with another candidate, it was on substance, it was on policy. It was not about the person or personality. And I think that matters a lot. I think the other thing, though, to say is what I certainly did is make sure people understood that if I wasn't their number one choice, and if I couldn't convince them that I should be their number one choice, that I might be their number two choice or their number three choice. I mean, I obviously actively asked folks, well, if I haven't convinced you, I hope I'll be your number one, but if not, please consider me as your number two.
Did anybody say that you were their number two? Like, what did you say? What do you say? What did you say to that?
Yeah, I had people say, I like you. I'm going to vote, though, for fill in the blank, Eric Adams, or because I've known him longer, or Catherine Garcia, because I like her experience in government. But I like you, too, and I'll make you number two. And then I'd say, thank you. That's a win, right? That's what ranked choice voting does, though, is it makes you go win, right? It's not just whether I'm number one, it's that you rank me and you rank me high. And in New York, you could rank up to 5. And we had a big field. We had 13 candidates on that ballot. You could rank up to 5. So you certainly wanted to be in the top 5 and preferably in the top 2 to 3.
Great. And then I know that there were some challenges. Well, there were some issues.
There were a few.
When it came to counting the ballots. And that's something also, like, we as advocates in this space hear a lot of pushback. Somebody's going to be confused. So can you just kind of talk a little bit about, like, you were in it. I was reading the papers. You were reading, you were in the city. Can you just talk a little bit about how you still came out of that experience thinking ranked choice voting is still the way to go?
Yeah, and if anyone who didn't read my Washington Post editorial after the race, I thought it was really important to write an editorial that said, I lost, but ranked choice voting didn't lose, right? And yeah. I felt that was very important, because here's the thing. People tend to forget that it was COVID, that we were running a mayoral race during COVID. All right. So that was a huge, just in and of itself, just reaching people, telling them what ranked choice voting was. Also, by the way, the city didn't invest in real money in ranked choice voting until a few months before the primary. No, you got to do public education way before that. There were folks who were opposing ranked choice voting, and so it was getting tied up in court battles. There were so many different factors that made the rollout of ranked choice voting unusually difficult. And I think it's important to say unusually difficult. It didn't have to be, right? But we had all these unique conditions. But all of that to say, I also was amazed at some of the civic groups and organizations and what they did to step up and help people understand what the ballot would look like. It was really important. And the Board of Elections did eventually put out a sample ballot. And I think that's critically important. Once people see, oh, this is what the ballot's going to look like, and here's how I fill it out, based on whatever my choices are, but here's how I'll be asked to fill it out. That's a game changer. So it's not really rocket science to help people understand it. And so we as a campaign would try to do as much just education, voter education as we could. But for example, my sorority, Delta Sigma Theta sorority, Black sorority, I didn't know this. They were having a mayoral forum. It was by Zoom because it was COVID. I did not know. We were on ready to go at the beginning of the forum. They took 20 minutes and did a brilliant ranked choice voting education at the beginning of the forum. They had a captive audience. They used it. It was brilliant. It was really well done. So I would say that there are just all these ways. And frankly, a lot of the concern was elderly in particular, that the elderly population that was really used to voting in a particular way would be most confused. I have no way of telling you whether that was true or not. I will say that from my experience, most people kind of got it, right? No one came to me. It was really interesting. We had a ballot initiatives to make it easier to vote in the state of New York. It might be a blue state, but we do not have the best voting laws on making it easy to vote in the state of New York. And there were statewide ballot initiatives that were on the ballot. And I had more people asking me, trying to figure out the ballot initiatives than anything else. I want to say that. And the other things that people are very conscious of going wrong in New York because it made news, that frankly was the incompetence of the Board of Elections, which has been fraught for years in New York City. Nothing new about having something go wrong in a New York City election. And there's now, we have a city council member. This has been a matter of debate in New York for a very long time. Sadly, they had refused, the Board of Elections had refused the help of the subcontractor that designed the system for them, which offered, and they said no. So none of the experiences of New York should suggest that the problem is ranked choice voting. Administration of the elections, resources in getting up front in voter education, engaging civil society, making sure everybody has a sample ballot way in advance of the election so they can just see what it's going to look like before they walk in. All of those are just good common sense ways to make sure people know how it will work.
Great. Awesome. I have one more question, but if folks want to submit questions in the Q&A, we have a little bit more time. So throw those in the Q&A and I will read them out loud when I get them. My last question actually has nothing to do with you being a candidate. I'm wondering what as a voter excites you most about using ranked choice voting?
So as a voter, I am a Black woman voter. So there are two key things that excite me a lot as a voter about ranked choice voting. One is women and women of color are more likely to be elected to office. The second is that, people of color, low income people are the ones most likely not to come back to the polls if it's a runoff. In other words, there's a drop off of participation in voting. And, I always made it back to the poll. But it's hard, right? Whether you're working, whether you have kids, you have things you got to do. And then there are all the people who can't afford to give up the paycheck to go back to the polls. So for me as a voter, it just excites me that it makes it easier for people's voice to count. And that's what I want most as a voter, people's voice to count.
Great. That's a wonderful, wonderful answer. Okay, I'm going to be reading these questions directly off of my other screen. So the first question we have is, given that Eric Adams was in first place from the very first count on, do you think RCV changed the race at all? And if so, how? If not, is that a matter of both candidates and voters needing to learn the system?
Yeah, I don't think ranked choice voting had an impact on the outcome. The reality is voters ranked their choice. I was really humbled and proud to get the second highest number of number one votes from that first round. Catherine Garcia and I, the other woman who's at the top of the three, really proud that two women in a city that's never elected a woman, that two women were serious contenders in the race. But yeah, I think we all knew that candidates like an Eric Adams, both Catherine and I had never run for office before. So not only were we women running for mayor in a city that had never elected a woman, we were not seasoned politicians, either one of us. So I think that actually says a lot about ranked choice voting, that we were viable. that we were viable, that the city, it demonstrated what I believe, which is the city also cares about the kinds of representation that they get to choose from, and that we get a variety of experiences in office. But, you know, I think the outcome was the outcome, and ranked choice voting didn't change the outcome. But it also serves to do one other thing. You know, a lot of the attack in New York City on ranked choice voting was fear that it would actually be worse. It would lead to a worse outcome for candidates of color, and the opposite was true. And I just am very grateful that that is the case.
Yeah, that's huge. That's great. Next question. Do you think that RCV favors moderates? Can progressives take coming in second through fourth after moderates and turn that into momentum?
Well, no, see, I think this race was about the issues in the candidates. I don't think it was about ranked choice voting. And that's as it should be, right? That's what we want.
Yes, yes.
All ranked choice voting does is it says to voters, you don't have to come back a second time. You just rank your candidates now. So if your first choice candidate doesn't win, who would you like to be second? That's all it does. So, you know, this was a race. Look, I would say, you know, as the candidate that was, I'm a progressive, unapologetically so, ran as a progressive, unapologetically so, really demonstrated the truth about New York City. We're a diverse city of diverse viewpoints. I think the voting showed that. But as a progressive, I was in the top 3 of this race. So I don't think it's a referendum on progressivism. I don't think it's a referendum on centrists. I think it's a referendum on where voters were in this particular election, and that's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. Can you talk a little bit about, and you kind of like touched on this a few times, but was voter turnout higher? And do you think that ranked choice voting was the reason, or part of the reason anyway, that turnout was higher?
Yeah, I mean, turnout was high. Look, we've got abysmally low turnout in New York City elections, abysmally low. Let me just start there. Turnout was higher in the primary. Turnout was lower in the general, but in the primary, now remember, New York's a very democratic city. There was not, you know, I think everyone knew that the primary was likely to determine the election. So it's not as big a surprise that voting dropped off in the general. But no, we had, considering how poorly we have showing in our elections, it was a really encouraging thing. But I actually don't think ranked choice voting was about voters showing up or not showing up. Honestly, I think voters decide whether to show up at the polls based on how they feel and whether they feel motivated to be at the polls for whatever reasons. And we remember that because of COVID, it was our first year of early voting.
Right.
And mail-in ballots, you know, expanding mail-in ballots. 2 things I think are deeply important for democracy and making it easier to vote. I would guess that those were the factors that helped turnout be a little higher. I don't think ranked choice voting, frankly, would have impacted out, you know, one way or the other, right? Positively or negatively. I don't think ranked choice voting impacts who shows up.
Okay. What additional innovations did you see or do you recommend for the outreach and education that does need to happen to voters to understand RCV?
Yeah, I think it is really important to think about which voters are often in need of more support and education and encouragement when things change. So that's why people were worried about the elderly, and the elderly of all races and income levels, by the way. But folks who are elderly being seen as folks we wanted to make sure you reached. Communities of color always, you know, and low income communities of any race always need to be real focal points. People with disabilities. You just want to make sure that for all those who have a harder time voting for whatever reason, are focal points to make sure that civic groups that have relationships, whether it's going to senior centers and doing trainings in senior centers. As I said, my sorority, which is a Black sorority, Really important that they took that on and made sure that they were in everything that they were doing, both for membership and for any forums or public events that they were having. Pastors and church leaders and rabbis and imams, you want religious institutions, you want the civic infrastructure of communities everywhere to have tools to engage the people that engage with them so that the penetration is deep. And you want to make sure in particular that you're doing that in underserved populations that typically have a harder time voting for or show up less for whatever reasons. Language access, obviously really important as well, and doing trainings for folks who don't speak English. All those things matter a lot.
Yeah, and making sure you're finding those trusted messengers to not only spread the message, but also to describe how to do it. Yeah. Last question. In your view, is the only way to expand RCV nationally by local cities changing to RCV slowly over time, allowing the rest of the nation to see its success? Or do you think it's better for voters to pressure their local and state governments to change their voting system?
Well, I'm a both and, I don't,
okay.
To me, it's not one or the other. It's really both. I mean, one of the things that we saw in New York, as I said, is we got ranked choice voting done for the city, not for the state. In New York, because there was so much opposition from our Black, Latino, and Asian caucus in the state house, I think it was important that it be done in New York City, which is, of course, a huge percentage of the state population. I think it helps make it a proof point that can make it easier to win at state level. At least that's my hope. But I think it's different everywhere. And to the extent people can get it done locally and statewide, or if it's possible to do it statewide and then locally, it's whatever works. But, frankly, and that's true whether we're talking about early voting, whether we're talking about mail-in ballots, whether we're talking about expanding the number of polling sites, making sure that the polls are accessible for people with disabilities, whatever the things are that we need to do. I think it's do it where we can, when we can, how we can, wherever we can.
Yeah, I like that. That sounds good. I just got one more question. Do you, and then we will wrap up and you can just take it away with closing remarks. Because Maya was kind enough to join us from the East Coast tonight. So it is late where she is. So one more question, wrap it up, and then we'll all stay on. We're going to hear from our own state Senator Yasmin Trudeau, hopefully, although I believe she's still on the floor. So we're going to have a little touch and go there, but I'm going to ask this question and then get some closing remarks and we'll be good to go. Do you think winners of elections under ranked choice voting will somehow govern or legislate differently because they have a real mandate with the required 50% plus of votes? Mayors of major cities have often won on 25% of voter turnout, and that seems in a way kind of odd.
That's a really great question. And I suspect that is very much dependent on the person who wins. Because in a way, that's a quality of leadership. What I will say is, because let's be honest, there's some people who run sincerely. One of the things I like about ranked choice voting is, as I used to tell people when I was co-chairing the campaign, it requires candidates to put their feet in everybody's streets, right? Because you don't just give up on those districts where it doesn't look like they'll vote for you number one, because you can try to be their number two or number three. And it really encourages candidates to get out there and get everywhere and really try to earn votes where they might not if you don't have ranked choice voting. And I think that does open the candidates up to understanding the experiences, the desires, the priorities of different communities and different people, which I do think is really important for our democracy and certainly for governance. If you're going to govern a city or a state or the federal government, you need to know and understand everybody's experiences. But I think what a leader does with that depends on the leader. I think we will have leaders who will absolutely learn and take that to heart and think differently about what some of the solutions are or how to make sure the solutions fit and serve everyone well. I think some might not. and hopefully not many, but if so, then voters have the opportunity to not rank them the second time around.
Exactly. It's still a democracy. It's still a democracy. And with that, I would like to invite you to give any closing remarks before you hop off for the evening.
Well, I just want to say thank you. Thank you, Fair Vote, for everything you're doing. I really believe deeply that when we're seeing the incredible danger our democracy is in these days, and let's be honest, our democracy is imperiled. It is not a foregone conclusion that we will have this republic tomorrow, the next day, or the next day after. And everything we do to say voting matters, to say voice matters, to say let's make it easier and better for people, to say let's make it more inclusive, to say let's make it more representative. Everything we do, whether it's at local level or county level or state level, whatever the level, it matters. It matters a lot. So I just want to thank you for holding it down in Washington.
Well, thank you so much for that hype up. I appreciate that. And thank you for joining us tonight. And
Thank you.
I'm sure that we will hear from you again soon. Thank you so much.
Be safe, be well.
You too. And now we're going to see, I don't think Senator Trudeau has had a chance to join us quite yet. She's busy. Session is happening. That's all right. I am here to give you a legislative update, as is my colleague, Colin Cole, who is here also. There he is. Hi, Colin. While we are waiting for Senator Trudeau, who really is at work right now, like she really is like doing her job, and hopefully will be able to join us for a few minutes. Colin and I are just going to give a quick legislative update. But first, Colin, do you want to introduce yourself? We have a whole lot of people on this call, and they might not all know who you are yet.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Colin Cole, and I'm a policy director here with Fair Vote Washington. Way back in December of 2016, I and a couple other volunteers co-founded Fair Vote Washington. And we were just a couple geeks in a coffee shop, Cafe Vita, I believe, on Capitol Hill. And here we are today, a statewide organization with a lot of staff and about to maybe pass a bill through the legislature. So really excited to be part of the movement.
Colin, first I want to thank you for doing that. First, would you mind, I know there have been rumors flying that Senate Bill 5584 isn't going anywhere, and that was the local options bill. So can you tell me why we shouldn't be crying ourselves to sleep tonight?
Yeah, so basically the way the legislature works with the House and the Senate is that they both have kind of arbitrary deadlines, a series of deadlines and hurdles you have to get over. And if you don't cross through them at the right amount of time, your bill's ineligible to advance through the process. And the Senate bill, sponsored by Senator Trudeau, did indeed, after making it through the first couple hurdles, not make it through the third arbitrary sort of cutoff deadline. So that bill is ineligible to advance. But the Senate bill wasn't our only bill, because we didn't put all of our eggs in one basket. And folks who have been following us for the last year or so might remember that Representative Kirsten Harris-Talley sponsored her own ranked choice voting local options bill. And that bill is actually on the House floor calendar right now. It hasn't been scheduled for a vote yet, but we have another 5 days to get that House bill passed. And if we can do that, we actually go back to the Senate and get another bite at the apple, as it were, and a chance to get through.
Great. Sorry, we're doing some last minute. We're gonna find her. We're gonna find her. Excellent. Yes, and as someone who is, this is personally my first legislative session, so I'm staying up late and I'm doing all of my studying, but I have to say Colin has been a wonderful guide in this process. So last year, as we all know, 1156 did not quite make it through. Can you talk about how that happened? What exactly happened?
Yeah, so this was another issue basically of arbitrary cutoffs and timelines. So we had the bill on the House floor, and we were hoping to get scheduled And it just so happened that there was more bills than they could get through than there was time to hear all the bills. And so they had to adjourn, and our bill just wasn't high enough on the priority list to be able to make it through, which is why the work that Fair Vote Washington has been doing, especially you, Steph, thank you so much, and all of our awesome volunteers over the last year, not just this legislative session, but March of 2021 all the way through December, has been so important, because we, in the intervening 9 months, have flipped votes, and we have taken legislators who were skeptical and who weren't sure if they liked the idea or not, or who thought that it was maybe interesting, but maybe we're moving too fast. And we were able to work with them and talk with them about some of the things Maya talked about, and some of the incredible work that other advocates have done around the country. And because of that, we're in an even stronger position today, because more people are going to vote yes than would have a year ago.
Cool. So one more thing that I would like you, Colin, specifically to talk to us about is why you think we need ranked choice voting. Because I hear you talk about all the ways that it's going to work and how it's going to come together and not to worry, but I actually don't know why you, Colin Cole, think that we need ranked choice voting.
Sure. Well, I'll try to give the medium length version of this answer, because the long answer is too long.
Yes, we are short on time. So yeah, medium sounds good. And
So
I will also answer after you. I'm not just throwing you under the bus here.
Great. I was going to turn around if you didn't, so I appreciate you volunteering that. I first started working in the realm of like political campaigns and issue advocacy professionally in 2014. Before that, I was working in television, and specifically I was working on a very bad reality TV show about the behind the scenes drama of a family run country music variety theater in Branson, Missouri. And while I was doing that job, just as a favor to a friend, and because I really cared about a campaign, I took a part-time side job helping to pass an initiative here in Washington State. And when that happened, I sort of got the bug, and I was like, oh, working on something I really care about is much more fulfilling than working on this TV show. But I wasn't sure where to point that energy. And then in April of 2015, I personally felt the call of Senator Bernie Sanders in his first presidential run, back when he was only polling at like 1%. So I was there before he was cool. And the reason that I liked Senator Sanders was because I thought I don't think all of his solutions were correct, and I didn't then either, but I thought he had really correctly diagnosed the problem. And the problem that he diagnosed was that there was a disconnect between the public opinion and the policy that our legislature passed, where for issue after issue, you could look at public opinion polls and the American public would feel that the climate crisis is worthy of being responded to. Or the American public might think that abortion should be legal by a rate of 2 to 1. And a lot of issues like this had Congress totally deadlocked in a way that didn't match the way the public felt. And the reason I was attracted to ranked choice voting is the same reason I was attracted to his campaign. And that's because it offers a path to get an elected government that actually reflects the views of the public. And that, I think, whether it's for a progressive issue that I care about, or an issue that I might disagree with, that our conservative or my conservative friends might appreciate, if the majority of the electorate feels a certain way, that should get translated into policy. And ranked choice voting is how we do that. And that's why I personally am called to the ranked choice voting movement.
All right, and I have had word we should have Senator Trudeau in about 5-6 minutes. But in the meantime,
good amount of time for you to give your answer.
I mean, Colin, I wasn't going to say anything, but if that was your medium length answer, I'm really glad we didn't go with your long answer. My answer does not start in 2014. My answer starts with just the facts. I come from the candidate world, and I have worked for some really fantastic candidates. I have also worked, or rather not been able to work, for some people who I thought would be really great candidates because they've been told that they need to wait their turn. And ranked choice voting, that often happens, just for clarification, that happens when there's more than one woman looking at a race, when there's more than one person of color, when there's more than one young person. You're catching my drift here, probably. And I have had friends of mine who have been told, don't run yet. I'm not ever going to run for anything, so no one's going to have to tell me that. But it really breaks my heart that people who have really good ideas are told, you can't even join this race. You can't even share your ideas in this space because we're worried that you're going to split the votes. We're worried that if there are 2 women running, that so-and-so will win because the women will split the votes. And that doesn't happen with ranked choice voting. You don't have to split your votes. You can just say, I like this woman more than this one, but I really think a woman should have that job. And that's it. So to me, it's really, I come at this from, I think, from the candidate space and the voter. As a voter, I'm excited to be able to like rank my choices, but I also, from the candidate space, I think that this is such a just obvious opportunity for candidates to jump in when they think they've got something to say, and to be able to pitch that the way that they want to pitch it, because as Maya Wiley just told us, you have to run on your policies. You can't run by dragging other people down. I, for one, am overworking on campaigns where it's all about how you're going to drag somebody down to the bottom with you.
Right.
So yeah, that's the long and short of why I like ranked choice voting. I think it enables, it improves access to the ballot, not just for voters, but also for candidates. And more of those candidates on the ballot mean more of those candidates in those offices. So yeah. While we're waiting, Colin, we've got a question for you.
Sure.
If the Senate bill didn't move with no agreement that the House bill was the vehicle, how does the House bill not die in the Senate?
There's multiple ways to answer this question. The first answer is that there actually was some agreement that the House bill should be the vehicle. And not only was that sort of a strategic call that our team made in concert with the legislators that we've been working with, but that is something that legislators were aware of as well. One of our most recent communications with senators didn't involve folks saying, oh, since we understand that the House bill is going to be the vehicle, we'll go ahead and wait and we can talk about this later on. So folks on both sides of both chambers rather are aware that the House bill is the vehicle, and that's where we're putting our focus.
Great, thank you. And I'm sure you already mentioned this when you were giving your update, but it does have to get out of the House by February 15th.
By the 15th, and that's House Bill 1156, 1156.
1156. All right, while we're waiting, I just realized that I made a rookie mistake when I was transferring over to asking Colin to join me. And that is, I have not told anyone on this call how to get involved. And there are a couple of ways to get involved. I come from a field background. I don't know how many campaign folks we have on this call, but we are the ones who call you during dinner and ask you who you're going to vote for. That's me. So feel free to direct all of your rage towards me, but also feel free to join our team, because right now we are calling, honestly, we're calling people who have already told us that they like ranked choice voting. We're welcoming them to the movement. If you're not comfortable hopping right on the phones, that's okay. Next Thursday, and actually twice a month, every month, next Thursday is the next one. We've got why ranked choice voting works. I really like these meetings for a couple of reasons. One, it's a really solid grounding in what ranked choice voting is. It also is run by a volunteer who therefore is very good at speaking to other volunteers about why ranked choice voting works. Her name is Kit. I don't know if she's on this call, but if she is, I hope that she hears me say this, because it's a really excellent training for how to talk to other volunteers, how to talk to folks who just have never heard of ranked choice voting. And it's also just a good way to kind of find other members of this community. We have, I'm not exaggerating, we have thousands of supporters across the state. And especially during this pandemic, it's been really hard sometimes to find that community. So I kind of view these as a good opportunity to learn more about ranked choice voting, to learn how to talk about ranked choice voting, and to meet other people who are a part of our community. So I think our organizer is going to drop the Mobilize link in the chat on for ranked choice, for our why ranked choice voting works. It's next Thursday, but it's also the first Tuesday and the third Thursday of every month. Senator Trudeau is here. I'm gonna give her one more second. You look like you're out of breath. We are so grateful to you. I know it's incredibly busy. Thank you for joining us tonight.
No problem. Yeah, I had to run up to my office really quick. We've got long floor action and caucus and all kinds of crazy things happening, but happy to be with you all. Thank you for just giving me a second to take my mask off. I probably have like weird lines.
Nope, you're good. You're
Okay.
totally good. Totally good. Yes, it is a very busy time of year. So I really I'm so grateful. Anytime you can spend with us is wonderful. We have about 20 minutes left on this call. I've got a couple questions for you. If folks, again, if anyone has questions for Senator Trudeau, probably start throwing them in the chat now. I'm sorry, do not put them in the chat. Oh, I'm gonna get in trouble for saying that. Please put them in the Q&A and I will read them as we get them. So thank you. My first things first, Senator, could you just take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself and tell us why you like ranked choice voting?
Sure. So Yasmin Trudeau, representing the 27th Legislative District, which is a lot of Tacoma. So it goes from the south end up north, includes Dash Point and Fife. So if folks are familiar with that area. It's an area that I grew up in too. I actually graduated from Foss High School and live around the corner from my old high school now. As far as what I love about ranked choice voting, I mean, I think there's a couple of things. One is I think that it really energizes people to want to participate in our democracy. I think giving people as many options for, voicing, feeling heard, and that the folks that they want provide them options instead of this sort of lesser of two evils. I think sometimes we get stuck in that, and I think that stagnates participation in our democratic process. So to me, anything that helps to build trust and motivate people to show up to the ballot box is always going to be really important. But I also just like that it gives a voice and an opportunity to folks that are often left out of conversations across the board. So I've seen, I've worked on this bill, at least in supporting it when I was in my former role as legislative director to the Attorney General's office. Shout out to Colin and Kamau, who brought it up for our support and consideration. And so I started looking more into it. And on a basic level, I think when I hear from communities that say this is something that could really increase representation, especially where we haven't had any, that's worthy of listening to. And then I started to look more into it and I just got really excited.
Perfect. That's great. Well, you just covered like all of my questions. So, which is great. Because something that we hear a lot as like on the advocate side is like, well, what problem are you even trying to solve? What are you doing? Like isn't everything just great? This is Washington State. Of course, everything's fine. And I'm sure that you've heard that too. So what do you say to that?
Well, it's not, first of all, I mean,
great.
I think we have large parts of our state actually that really, really could benefit from having, more opportunities to engage in democracy and more representation. I think we've got areas in Eastern Washington that's sort of more obvious, but even when we look at our democratic process and who's engaging, for a place like Tacoma, a city like Tacoma, which is incredibly diverse, it is very strange to me that I'm the first woman of color to represent that area. So if things were going so great, I don't think we would be fighting so hard to make sure that there's increased representation across the board. And I've been in the legislature in some capacity since 2015. I started off as a legislative assistant and then I became staff, and then I went over to the Attorney General's office and advocating. And we've definitely seen an increase in representation, but when we talk about increase, we're talking about like 2 to like 6, so
right.
Comparatively to the grand scheme of things, I think we have lots of opportunities to do better. And I think ranked choice voting is just one of those.
Yeah, I think so. So as a freshman, recently appointed. This is your first session, correct?
Yes.
Yes. So as a freshman, I'm sure there are plenty of things that could be a priority. And why this one? There are so many problems that we're facing right now. Why did you choose this as your priority?
Well, because I think when you increase representation, then you increase the amount of people in the room that really understand what policies are important to the people that they're passing them for. So when we think about, when I think about my perspective and my lived experience in the housing, universe, for example, I think that's really important. I think there's been a number of times where I brought up something based on my lived experience and my family's background, because it doesn't come from wealth or politics or anything that you would sort of think of as a sort of, I hate to say standard politician background, but it doesn't come from privilege. And sometimes I will offer those experiences to give a different perspective. And, think about housing now and homelessness. And I think there might be less than a handful of folks who are renters. And most of my family rents. I'm the first person in my family to buy a home. And so I very much understand like both sides of that piece. And I just think that the more people you get that have more diverse experiences, the better policy you're going to make and the more deeply you impact, especially those most vulnerable among us who often get left out.
Yeah. Ranked choice voting is such an important first step. And
Right.
no matter what your other priorities are, that's a really
just getting access to a more equitable democracy. I mean, or creating more equitable democracy. It's about as simple as that. And I just see this as one of those tools.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you are the senator from Pierce County. Pierce County has a history with ranked choice voting. I'm trying to think of nice ways to say this. How has that history affected how you think about ranked choice voting?
Well, growing up in this area, I often wondered about the politics in Pierce County. It certainly didn't reflect me or what I consider to be my community or my circle of people, I guess. And so it was really strange to look at that and think, oh, okay, well, I'm not sure that the leaders in Pierce County have always reflected all of the people that live in Pierce County. So I'm often very skeptical about how things have always been done. And I think if we're looking at one negative experience that, got somebody that we may not like in office, then we ought to overturn our entire election system, because we have all kinds of people to get into office that I would not vote for or appreciate being there. So I think one instance, just doesn't make sense to me. And I think oftentimes it's actually good to look back and learn from experiences, because why would you give up after trying one time? If I gave up trying after one time, I wouldn't be anywhere that I'm at right now. That's for sure.
Yeah. Question related to that one. You are my senator, so if I need anything on ranked choice voting, I'm just going to email you. But what about the rest of the Pierce County delegation? Are they all on board with ranked choice voting? For those of us who live in Tacoma but not in your district, who should we be emailing and calling to make sure that this gets out of the House and into the Senate? 1156.
Yeah, so I've been really lucky and grateful to be working alongside Senator Tawana Nobles, who, has really been willing to put herself out there. And I think especially as her as a Black woman, as me as a woman of color, like and newer members and younger members, I think we bring a very different voice than what's been historically in the Pierce County delegation. So that's been a really nice partnership. I think for folks that have been around for a very long time, those memories are long. And again, I think there's that sting of like, well, we tried it once. I don't agree with that argument, but I would look at the folks that have been there for quite some time. You're going to see there's changes happening in the 29th. So I know that district has members that feel, with all due respect, I think those members could use a little touch, but I think you will see some changes happening in the 29th and in the next election cycle, because one representative is now not going to be running again. So again, opportunity to see who else and what kind of other voices we can get in that space. So if you're in the 29th, I'd really suggest reaching out. Also, I think it's the 26th that tends to be more conservative, and some House members in the 28th.
Okay.
Use a touch.
Great. Excellent. And we also, like Fair Vote, we prioritize if we think there's somebody who needs an extra touch, then you will probably hear from us to say like an email saying like, follow up with your person. But we will definitely.
Yeah, I don't want to put any like members on blast.
No, of course
but
not.
I would just say the
course
districts just, and you know, even if you don't know, it's always good to have a touch, because I think everybody in the Pierce County, like, even if I'm for ranked choice voting, if folks are reaching out to me about supporting ranked choice voting, that's great. It doesn't, you know, I think people should direct their energies just to preserve their energies, but I don't mind hearing about something that I also support. So I say, go big, just go to wherever you are in the Pierce County delegation and chat.
That's so important to say that sometimes even if someone's a supporter, we still need to let them know that we support what they're supporting, because I have a feeling that maybe you are also on the negative end of some comments, and that sometimes just having those nice ones is just nice. It's just nice to have. It's just nice to have.
That's a really interesting perspective, being on this side of issues, because like last night, this is off of ranked choice voting, but if you'll indulge me, like last night, there were a lot of really hard votes on a lot of really hard topics. And there were some decisions that there were enough votes to move a bill, right? I didn't agree with those votes and I voted no, but then, you know, I go on Twitter and it's like, well, Senate Democrats, and, you know, it is a lonely feeling, because you're like, does no one notice that I actually like held the line? I don't know. So anyway, I digress from ranked choice voting, but I do think that it can be a remarkably lonely space. So if you do have a chance to thank folks, I think it motivates and builds those of us up that are struggling to figure out how to push our colleagues.
That's a really, really important point. I'm glad that you brought it up. I would love to do a couple of things. I'm not seeing, if anyone has any more questions, I'm not seeing more questions. So if anyone has more questions, please throw them in the Q&A. But Senator, I would love to give you an opportunity to give us some wrap-up remarks. If anybody's got another question, I will throw it in there. But if you've got some wrap-up remarks, that would be great.
Sure. You know, I would just say thank you. I think it was a cool opportunity to be able to work on this bill, especially given the, you know, getting to know it over some time. But I can't emphasize enough, like, how important it is. Every time I hear that I'm the first of something, which it turns out I'm the first on first, and I'm like, why? Like, you know, my goal now is to like never be the last. Like, okay, you'd be the first, but like, how can we get more? And I think with ranked choice voting or any opportunities to just reach out and make people, especially in historically excluded communities, feel like they're heard and part of the process. Like that's how we'll cultivate the bench and get new people interested in joining this space. And as much as people feel like, you know, they're tired of politics or, you know, just kind of want to wash their hands of it, I think actually the more we do that, the more we give power to the people that make crappy decisions for us. So I would just say, you know, thanks. This is hopefully one of other, you know, many other opportunities I'll get to work on creating more equitable democracy. But it's been a cool ride. It's been fun to work on this during my first session. And, you know, I like being a little bit of a rebel. So if I can push the politics in my area a little more in the right direction, that's also fun.
No, for sure. That's totally true. So thank you very much. I do just want to say before everybody logs off, I know it's almost 7 o'clock and I haven't had dinner. I'm sure I'm not the only one.
I haven't either, and I'm supposed to be back on the floor at 7. So.
All right, we really got to let Senator Trudeau go. Before we do that, we would love it if you, after you go to like the why ranked choice voting works, if you want to join us, we've got phone banks on Mondays and Wednesdays. We're going to drop those links in the chat. Everyone should sign up. You get a script, you get coaching, you get numbers to call of people who've told us they like ranked choice voting. Come on, it's like the best. It's just you talking to other people who like ranked choice voting about ranked choice voting. It's really fun. Unfortunately, we're still just on Zoom, so no in-person phone banks yet. But they're a really important organizing tool as we move forward. We have been using some of them to, you know, let folks know like, hey, your state senator, your state rep isn't supportive yet. Can we like get some folks in their district to call? And if perhaps you're a little bit short on time, but you aren't able to make a donation, bye, Senator, thank you. we would be very grateful for that as well. We are able to put on these events with folks like Maya Wiley and Senator Trudeau because of those, because of your donations, because of the kindness of your donations. So whether it's time or dollars, we are grateful for anything that you can give to us. You will be getting a follow-up survey from us in the next couple of days to find out how we did, how did I do tonight? I would like you to fill out the survey and tell me that I did a great job. That would be fantastic. Also to tell us, like, who else do you want us to talk to? It's really exciting for me to get to have these conversations, but we really want to hear from you guys on, like, who should we talk to next? What do you want to talk about? So feel free to fill out the survey with that information. We really do read them. We really do look at all of them. And I think that that's just about it. It is 7 o'clock. I'm hungry. My dog is hungry. And that, I think, is it for the night. Thank you all so very much.